Hello, one and all, and welcome back to the Super Show podcast. It's episode number 185, and it is your one-stop shop, your favorite podcast that covers all things gaming. And on that note, we are going to be discussing a really big, really hairy abomination that nobody really appears to like. But enough about me. I'm going to introduce my co-host, Mr. Alex Jones, who didn't laugh at what might be the joke of the podcast inside the first 30 seconds.
I did laugh. I just didn't do a.
I heard nothing.
I
This
did
is an audio product for a good number of people, Jonesy. If they don't hear you laughing, how do they know you're laughing?
I did my presenter laugh, which is where you laugh, but you don't make a sound, so you don't put off the flow of the presenter. My apologies. No, you are correct. We're going to be talking about Skull Island: The Rise of Kong. Which I must admit, it wasn't even on my radar until some of our patrons were chatting about it in the Discord and saying about how terrible it looked. And then it's our lead story because it's so trash.
Personally, I'm all for it because this just takes me back to the golden era of quickly made, poorly made, big licensed tie-in games that only exist because they could somehow were able to convince someone in a suit who didn't really know what they were doing to let them put the name Kong on the box. Again, it takes me back to like the golden era of THQ and publishers that don't exist anymore, often for very good reasons. RIP. But that's not all we're going to be talking about, Jonesy. We're going to be talking a little bit about El Hombre Araña, which I found out prior to this podcast's beginning is Spanish for Spider-Man. And we're not going to retrace too many of our steps from last week's episode, but of course we have now played, I'm guessing, a good chunk of that game. I don't want to speak for you.
10 minutes.
Hey, he's played at least 10 minutes. I've played at least 10 hours. Between the two of us, we'll offer some opinions as well as offering a couple of news stories that have popped up over the course of that game's first week on release. And then we're also going to round things out, hopefully, should we have the time, by talking about a game that probably doesn't exist, but Jonesy is going to try and convince us it does, in the form of Squadron 42, that's Star Citizen's long-awaited standalone single-player campaign. And we may be even talking about some rumours, probably not confirmed rumours. I know Chris, if he were here, would be vigilant about that. So just rumours, but that supposedly are outlining some of the story details, plot points, maybe even gameplay details for Far Cry 7. And I thought I'd pick that one out, Jonesy, just because it sounds like that series could be going in an interesting new direction. I don't know how you feel about that. As someone who I just learned hasn't finished any of the last 4 Far Cry games, maybe that's a good thing.
The last 3. Yeah, 4, 5, and 6. I haven't finished.
But I'm going to throw a curveball in there. You also didn't even play the one that came out. What came out before 5 and 6?
Primal?
No,
Primal
was
the 2 women one.
Yeah, the two women one.
What was that even called?
New Dawn.
New Dawn. I did play New Dawn. I played that.
Oh, you did.
I think I streamed it with someone. I think I streamed some with Steph back in the day. Maybe even.
Oh, jeez.
But no, I didn't finish that either. But if you want to include that, that's. But then I also didn't finish Primal. So I mean, I haven't finished the last 5. And do you know what? Okay, this is terrible because it was such a good game. I didn't even finish Blood Dragon because I got to the point where you walk through the door and it says if you go through this door, you can't come back. Be warned. And I was like, I don't want to stop playing yet. And we already had this discussion. I'm one of these people that I regularly get to like the last 10% of a game, and then I don't want to finish the game because I'm having such a blast. And then like a couple of weeks go by, I've done a few more side quests, and then I just never finish the game. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah,
with a lot of Far Cry.
It is the curse, the plague of the completionist. How are you going to actually make any progression in the story if you have other icons popping up on the map along the way? I've got a funny feeling that may or may not be included in any discussions we do have around Spider-Man 2. But all of that and more still to come on this week's episode. And a reminder that if you do ever want to join in and watch us live, as I've heard already some good folks are, then you can head over to our YouTube channel. The handle, I guess, is at SuperShow Pod. We're live on Monday evenings here in the UK almost every week. And yes, you can continue to watch it on YouTube after the fact or catch it on podcasting platforms like Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts. But I think, Jonesy, the live stream is the only place where you can join in the live chat and tell us that we're wrong in real time, which we often are.
Absolutely, we often are. Also, they give me little tidbits of information that I
There
find
you go.
useful because often I get stuff wrong. And so it's my little. It's like a stream of consciousness, which is smarter than my own. That I can check every now and then as we're chatting away. But I would like to give a shout out to some people that are joining us right now in the live stream. I'm talking Miami Sunrise, Magni, Rodrigo, Classy Cat, Al Ashley, Shell Shock, and Joel are all joining us in the chat. Hello, everybody. Lovely to have you. Let me clarify as well. I was joking about Spider-Man. I've played at least. Well, I've played 35%. So I don't know how much that is. Probably like 7 hours, something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm a bit of a side quest doer, though, as I said, though. So I don't know if that. Oh no, of course that percentage will include the side quests. I would imagine. I guess so.
I think so, yeah, because that's the percentage it shows you when you're loading back into the game and you're essentially picking which save file or which save slot you want to jump back into. So yeah, I think that is an overall percentage completion because mine is hovering around the 50% mark right now. But according to the mission log section of the game, I think I've done closer to 2/3 of the total main story missions.
Right.
But yes, more on Spider-Man to come for all the spoiler-free, I should say, discussion anyone might have felt like they were missing out on last week, all still to come. But before, Jonesy, we get stuck into... I'm trying to think of a good little segue here. I don't know.
The King of the Spiders.
Then who's the King of the Spiders? There are two spiders.
Spider-Man.
They're both, but then that's the weird thing about Spider-Man is that they're both called Spider-Man, and on top of that, as I very quickly learned playing Spider-Man 2 this week, both Spider-Man refer to the other Spider-Man as Spider-Man. So they'll be in combat and they'll be like, "I'm on your right, Spider-Man." It's like, but okay,
I thought they would have made a mistake in the subtitles because it had Spider-Man and it was Miles talking, and then I suddenly was like, "Of course they can't call him Miles because then everyone would know who Miles Morales is."
Yeah, exactly. Although again, they do that sometimes because it feels like the Spider-Men have never been more relaxed about who they let know who they really are, and how often they just stand around on rooftops without their masks on.
Annoys me. Actually, annoys me how often they do that. Like I'm like, you're supposed to be. And Miles just, like you said, Miles just tells everyone. Peter's a little bit more careful, but he is rogue in this one. But yeah, Miles just let anyone he meets, he's just like, "Oh, I'm Spider-Man."
Yeah, you do get it, but then again, we're technically, a skip, hop, and a jump away from a world where Clark Kent takes off a pair of glasses and becomes Superman. So we can't nitpick too much.
Maybe.
What we can nitpick though, Jonesy, is when games are so bad that even the dreaded 7 out of 10 from IGN curse appears to evade them, and they drop all the way down to a fucking 3 out of 10, and that's exactly what happened to Skull Island: Rise of Kong, a game which seemingly came out of nowhere. No one was really talking about it. Even its own developer, Iguana B, and the game's publisher, Gameville Entertainment, have been completely silent on social media platforms about the game's release. But it did come out last week. And I think part of the reason this even got reviewed by major outlets, Jonesy, is because of how quickly social media realized this game looked like hot trash. Anyone that's seen a tweet or any kind of post that's got even an image, let alone a video from this title inside the last 7 days, will be well aware of the fact that, I mean, as our thumbnail suggests, we thought things couldn't drop much lower than Lord of the Rings Gollum as far as 2023 was concerned. Gollum may well have met his match. How much of this game have you seen with your own eyes thus far?
I've only seen the trailer before it came out, and I've seen a couple of screenshots of it. I must, because okay, so I think I even made the joke that in the Discord that the reason they do so many quick cuts in the trailer is because they don't want you to linger on any one shot long enough to see just how bad it is. I was kind of hoping that it might be a case of it looks terrible, but maybe it plays okay. But yeah, if the review's anything to go by, no, that's unfortunately not the case.
Yeah, regrettably, because I know what you mean. Sometimes you see even a kind of but rough-looking third-person action game, and you think to yourself, well, even if it's just one of those games where I'm going to mash square for 4 hours and punch people in their head really fucking hard, if they make the punching in the head part feel good, that I might have a good enough time not to justify the cost of entry, but at least to make it a passable game. But regrettably, yeah, it feels like that's not the case here.
It's also we make the joke often that we're in the day and age of Unreal Engine 5 where it's a shame that people can make games look so good because you get tricked so easily. So to make a game that looks this bad, there was a little part of me that said to myself, well, hold on, it looks bad because they've actually made a good, maybe they're trying to make a decent game and they're more relying on the mechanics and the gameplay, and yeah, just like a fun game, not like a very, very good like AAA game, but just like a fun B game or something like that. But no, it seems that apparently they've not even managed that. It's just
Well,
bad all round.
yeah, it is an interesting point. I guess it comes down to that weird thing of like, the capability of things like Unreal Engine 5 are making it incredibly easy to make good looking things that look like they might be games, but they're actually just you downloaded a model from a certain web store and made it fly around in a way that vaguely looks Superman-esque, and then put it inside that Matrix Awakens demo and told everyone you'd made a
Yep.
Superman game when you haven't made a Superman game. When the realities of actually making a open and shut video game, a lot more complicated still. This one, as we mentioned already, came from Iguanabee. They're actually a small studio based in Chile, of all places, Jonesy. And they've developed in the past a party game called Head Snatchers and also a third-person shooter called G.I. Joe Operation Blackout. So they do have some history with working with, fairly prominent IPs, fairly prominent licenses in the past. And although Kong, Rise of Kong, is priced at $40 or £35 here in the UK, it's, as we said, raising eyebrows for everything from graphics, gameplay, animations. I pulled out, as someone who hasn't played it, Jonesy, a couple of quotes from people who have.
Nice.
I don't know if you want to hear some specifics on what might be going wrong, but
Yeah, of
apparently,
course I do.
there we go.
I want to
Brace
know.
yourself. Movement is awful, with Kong bouncing off the scenery, failing to make contact with ledges, and jumping around as though he was weightless. Combat consists of spamming a single button in the direction of an enemy and making contact with them. Again, I could think of some other games that kind of could describe, but oh well. Cutscenes are flat out bizarre and almost devoid of animations. Almost every environment Kong enters is empty, barren, and bland. And in one scene, we see the player running around for 30 seconds and seeing essentially nothing, following a sequence of jumping between rocks and inexplicably falling off them. There are also weird things where, like, cutscenes where it feels like, I don't know if the model wasn't finished or an animation wasn't finished, but some part of it gets briefly replaced by just a still image of a dinosaur, and all these horrible close-ups of Kong doing really uncomfortable looking reaction faces like he was posing for a thumbnail, which I guess he was for our purposes. But
Surely
star.
this is just Gollum all over again. This is, you've somehow got a license. You've realised that buying the license meant you've got no money left to make a game, and so you've done as what you can do with the time, money, and expertise you have, and then you've just hoped that the name will sell enough copies that you turn a profit. I think that's
I
the
mean,
whole thing.
you kind of hit the nail on the head, Jonesy, because so Iguanabee have actually gone out there and done some interviews almost to defend themselves. Well, actually, I should clarify, it was an anonymous developer from Iguanabee who's been speaking to
Right.
The Verge, and they are suggesting that, again, as you kind of pointed out, a lot of the blame might fall on the publisher, Game and Entertainment. This is a direct quote. The development process of this game was started in June of last year, that was aimed to end on June 2nd of this year. So a 1 year development
Wow.
process.
Okay.
And in total, around 20 people started from scratch to create the game, which, as The Verge points out, is a task that would be challenging for even in the most seasoned of developers. You know, big license or not, 20 people being given 12 months to make a game, that again, you could scale it in. The scope obviously has some impact on the extent to which it is a disaster, but that goes somewhere at least to explaining just why this went as wrong as it did. And if that is all true, and I mean, I'll be honest, it sounds very believable just based on the product we got, then yeah, then the actions of Game Mill Entertainment may well be somewhat to blame, or at least if not to blame, then they offer an explanation as to how we ended up here, right?
Yeah, no, and it's very obvious and unfortunate. It's got to be because where Godzilla, Kong, all the monster stuff at the moment is in
Yeah.
sort of in a very good position to sort of get tie-ins and stuff. So you've got to imagine that it's a complete cash grab, unfortunately.
I guess then the two questions I have on my mind then, Jonesy, and I don't know, I'll put them to you, but I don't know if the answers are even that easy to kind of to pull out of thin air. But one, why are the people who hold the rights to these licenses or these IPs being either I was about to say tricked into these agreements. Let's just say drawn into these agreements, where as you said, there is a lot going on with the Kong IP at the moment. It feels like the recent movies and the Godzilla tie-ins have kind of turned feelings around a little bit. Not that Kong Sentiment was ever that bad. There's that TV show based on that kind of Kong Godzilla universe that's I think debuting pretty soon. If you had the rights to it, unless there's some weird thing where the video game rights are owned by someone completely separate and it's all just a bunch of suits making money and signing bad deals, why would you say, oh yeah, there's a Chilean developer called Iguana Bee who made G.I. Joe Operation Blackout, we're going to give them 12 months to make a game with your license, sign across the dotted line? Like, why do that? Because the offer can't be huge.
I think it's because they have no intention of making a big budget game, and then someone comes along and says the right things to them. This to me is like the high level business stuff, is where you get business people with business people that are not creatives, and someone says, well, are you thinking of making a game, like a tie-in game for any of this stuff? And they go like, no, we don't have the marketing, whatever, the budget to do that. And they go like, oh man, I could do it for $2 million. And they go, what? You couldn't? And they're like, yep. How would you want it? In a year? I can do it in a year. And they go, look, we've made this game and that game. And you get someone who hasn't looked at a game since 1983, looks at G.I. Joe, the game that you've made, and says, oh, okay, the kids will love it. And in reality, I think, it's people that don't really know an industry just thinking, that sounds fine. And then I think that happens a lot, to be honest, with a lot of these tie-in things, is that it's like a second thought, or it's something in the background. It's kind of sure, it's not really costing us anything. It's just part of these marketing spend. So that's what I think it probably comes down to.
And maybe developers like Iguana Bee feeling forced or under some kind of pressure, giving the nature of the industry at the moment, to agree to unrealistic things, like agree to developing games for like less money than they'd ideally like to have spent on it, for less time than they'd ideally liked. Because if you're offered, let's say, a couple of $1 million, whatever it was, over the course of a year, that could be the difference of another year of being able to pay your staff or shutting up shop if there aren't any other jobs coming in. So maybe there are smaller developers who feel more pressure than ever to take these unrealistic and almost impossible deals, because it saves their studios. I don't know.
Yeah, you may well find that, in a lot of these cases where they do it, they use the money to finish another game that they actually wanted to, put more time and effort into. I wonder if that happens a lot, and they sort of skim some of the budget from that to keep people on, in their jobs and things. It's very possible. Be interesting to see if Iguana Bee or the people who, I was going to say the developers of Golem aren't doing anything else, are they now? They're just publishing. But yeah, we have to see if anything else comes out of Iguana Bee in the near future.
That's the interesting thing. Like we've joked before about how kind of the market for really, poorly rated B games based on, high profile licenses dried up massively, because there were a lot of developers and publishers that seemed to rely on the revenue that came from that market almost entirely, especially around the mid noughties. Thinking about how many times the PS2 felt like it was flooded. Like every major movie, every blockbuster movie had a really bad video game tie-in, and then they kind of died because it felt like consumers got more savvy with it. Making games got more expensive and took longer, and it was just kind of, it was basically, it was on its last legs already, and it was waiting for something to push it over the edge, and eventually that happened, and entire publishers disappeared. It's tempting to say the more games like this that we see, that it's coming back. But then, as you pointed out, Daedalic had such a bad experience that they've gone entirely into publishing. We don't know what the future looks like for Iguana Bee and for Game Mill. There was the weird stuff with THQ Nordic, where they started to bring back some of their kind of more famous licensed sort of series. And I know they were dipping back into the SpongeBob pool for a little while there, but again, that now gets messed up with all the Embracer stuff, and I don't know what the future looks like there. So is it back, or is it people hoping it was back and it's not?
Yeah, exactly. It's just a complete mess. There is a little part of me which wonders also with these sorts of things, is are they playing it almost in the way that is it Blumhouse, I think, do it, whereby you spend a very small amount of money on a lot of different things, hoping that one will hit. So in the sense of like you manage to get a big streamer who says, "Oh, look at this game. It's it looks really jank, but it's actually kind of fun." And then you get a load of people buy a game off the back of it, and so they make they do minimum spend, but then they actually get a decent amount of return. I do wonder if sometimes that is part of the process that these publishers have when thinking about budgets for games. But then with video games, it's just not the same deal, right? Like if you just don't put the money in, you don't really get a game that gets made for a little amount of money and happens to become a cult classic, because like this, as you've said, you just get a bad game. You get a game with nothing happening, with still images instead of cutscenes. You get a game of like bad collision physics, and you can't get away with that. Like no one's gonna go, yeah, but the story's fantastic. Like it's not gonna happen, is it? So
I know, but I'm looking at the website now for Game Mill Entertainment. I think you might be right about kind of the way in which they operate and how they kind of hedge their bets. Because when you look at what they write about themselves on the About page of their website, the first bulletproof of what they consider their quote-unquote core offering is savvy licensing. We've partnered with some of the world's biggest brands, including Nickelodeon, Disney, PGA Tour, Universal Studios, Sony, Cartoon Network, and more, turning great IP into great entertainment for console and mobile gamers worldwide.
right,
But then you look at like the games they've actually made, and it's like, well, to be fair, apparently they were involved with like Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, which I don't think people hated. Same with Cruise and Blast. But then elsewhere, there's Nerf Legends. I remember, based on like Nerf guns,
yeah.
the Nerf lights. So I remember that being really bad. Like American Ninja Warrior Challenge, Big Buck
Okay.
Hunter Arcade, Goosebumps the game. But then Big Hero 6 Battle in the Bay, like the big, that's working directly. Same with Frozen Olaf's Quest, like working directly with Disney on some massive IP. So maybe they've just got, they've got contacts, they've got a bit of a reputation, they can kind of swing these things. And there's a reason that when you go on their games page, Skull Island isn't even there, because it's like they can every time you make a misfire, you sweep it under the rug, and the accountants deal with it by taking it, because the other games did make enough money.
Do you reckon that there's a calculation where they effectively say, put it out, like we're done with this, it's trash, put it out, because even if we sell 100 copies, at least we've made back a little bit of money? Or do you think they hope? So you do that, because I always wonder about that. Because we talked the other week about like studios cancelling games, outright cancelling them because they're like, no, we don't want to do that. But I suppose some studios, or some publishers even, it's they're willing to take the hit.
Yeah. I think live service games like Hyenas was going to be. I think that's when we were discussing it. Are probably a little bit more complicated, because then you're looking at, is it a free to play launch?
Right.
What was your budget for the marketing spend around launch? What are your server costs? What are your costs in terms of like fostering a community or doing updates? And can you really afford the bad PR of releasing a free-to-play live service game that is technically dead on day zero? Like, you've already taken all the live ops people off it before it's even come out.
And you're
at
still
some point you
supporting
just
it.
don't. Yeah, at some point just don't release it. Whereas like a technically boxed game that I think I saw on the website for Game Mill, they were boasting about their relationship with Walmart. So there are probably physical copies of Skull Island sat at Walmarts around America being picked up by parents of kids that don't have a fucking clue what they're looking at. Like, there
That
probably
so
is some
true.
money. Yeah, there's some money to be made there. And because here's the other thing, right? Video games can be delayed. There's no movie tie-in for Skull Island that I know of. I know that as we discussed, like Kong and Godzilla stuff has been going on of late, but nothing in the immediate future that I can think of that's specifically Kong related. So I'm sure that there's some version of this where Iguana Bee went back and were like, can we have another 6 months, please? And Game Mill looked at it and were like, this won't make it significantly better enough for it to review better,
Yeah.
for those reviews to have a positive impact on sales. Like, our forecasts say that it's going to sell the same amount now as it would with another year of development time, so we're releasing it. Sorry. And Iguana Bee go, oh shit.
I know someone who might buy this on sale.
Is it one of your sons?
But it's me, because
Oh, it's you.
it's me for my kid, because my 7-year-old loves the MonsterVerse. And one thing with like the whole MonsterVerse thing is he's too young to watch any of like the new Godzilla Kong movies.
Okay.
But he loves, like, he'll watch any YouTube video about Kong, Godzilla. Like he knows actually quite a scary amount about all the different iterations of like Godzilla and Kong and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, he would play this because some of the games they play that are movie tie-ins that I've watched them play streaming through PlayStation Now are trash, like real trash. That, to be fair, probably belong in the same sort of bracket as this 3 out of 10
Yeah.
Kong game. And so realistically, I mean, if they played this, or if my 7-year-old played this, he'd probably have a good time. And if I could pick it up for $5.99, sell it somewhere on a deal, I'd probably do it just because I'd be like, yeah, he's gonna be happy. He's not gonna know any different. They play Roblox for crying out loud.
I know, but then apparently so does everyone on the planet. I've never seen anyone physically actually play it with my own two eyes, but I'm told everyone does.
I've played it. I've played it quite like a lot.
I haven't seen it with my own two eyes, Jency, so
we'll have
your
to
word against mine.
We'll do a stream. It is Roblox. It is the most of it anyway seems to be the most like ground level in game development. Like they are, do you know what they are? They're clicker. A lot of them are clicker games in 3D like game form.
Hang on, Josie. Don't make me download Roblox here.
That is what they are. They're the ones my kids play a lot of the tycoon ones where it's effectively just stand on a button and to get money, and then you can buy a dropper, which means that you get more money more quickly, and then they're just doing that. That's what it is. And then you build a base, and the base grows as you get more, as you like buy more stuff, just running over buttons, buying more stuff. And do you know what? A lot of those Roblox games are probably comparable to this Kong game, like in quality and in how they play. So,
hey, probably. Well, I guess we'll have to watch the space if Skull Island does ever make its way down to the £5 mark, then maybe we'll be getting an update on the podcast about how Jonesy, or rather Jonesy's extended family, have been enjoying their time with the title thus far. But I guess what Jonesy's admittance reminds us of more than anything is that there will, for as long as there are billions of people out there on planet Earth, there will always be someone stupid enough to give a significant, or not insignificant at least, amount of money to a bad cause, which brings us nicely onto our Patreon. Patreon.com is the link, patreon.com/SuperShow. For anyone that doesn't know, this podcast at this stage, if you haven't seen the number of views we accumulate on platforms like YouTube, is entirely supported and entirely funded by Patreon. It's the reason that we are able to be here week after week and keep the lights on. Not the lights in our homes, that would be slightly more concerning. We have other means by which we keep electricity flowing through our domiciles, but the Patreon is the cherry on top. And it's not just keeping the lights on, there's also a whole bunch of perks and benefits. If you do head over to patreon.com/supershow, you will see that if you pledge various amounts of money at the various tiers, you will get everything from access to our Discord server, to access to Patreon-exclusive videos and Patreon-exclusive podcasts. And again, as I've pointed out in the past, everything that we've made for patrons over the entirety of the last 3+ years at this point is available to you if you do head over to that link and check it out and pledge just a little bit of money. There are some names on screen right now of some fine folk that have already headed over there and done that. So a huge shout out to all of them. But I'd also like to give a personal thank you to Aaron Cameron, Athletic Gravy, Brimstone, Ice Not Rock Salt, Jesper Cam, Darl Nielsen, and Pastors Guild. And then, of course, we have the big dogs, the members of the board, Brett Z, aka Shellshock, Geometric Potter, Hacksaw Bookread, Manuel Guerrero, and Peacewad. A huge thank you once again to each and every one of you, no matter which amount of money you're pledging, no matter if you're a past or present patron, it's all a huge help, and we thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you guys, and thank you for our top, letting me know about the top news story that we were going to cover this week in the Discord, which was Skull Island, Rise of Kong.
There you go. Thank you for keeping Jonesy well read and giving us something to talk about as we managed to fill what would otherwise be 2 hours of dead air every week. Although, Jonesy, for as engaging as a story as that Skull Island one was, let's be honest, at the beginning of this podcast, we had a little bit of trouble weaning ourselves off the topic of discussion of Spider-Man 2. So let's not hold off anymore. You've been playing it. Based on... You said 30 to 40%, didn't you? I can't remember the exact number.
Yeah, I'm about 35%. Yeah.
Let's say maybe let's say 7 hours. How does that sound?
That sounds about right. Yeah, probably about 7 hours.
So where are you at with it in terms of your feelings?
Um, I try and be measured. So far, I think it's pretty fantastic. It's
Okay.
improved on everything I wanted to improve upon Miles Morales and Spider-Man 1. It looks fantastic. The New York is very pretty. It's the fact that they've expanded now beyond Manhattan Island, and you've got some of those other places like it's Brooklyn, Queens, and I think it is.
Yeah.
I've actually found myself getting almost confused as to where I am, because you just zip across a bridge and then I'm like, I don't know where I am now. Where are the big skyscraper ones? And I have to like look on the map and be like, oh, because that's what I remember. So I actually jumped back into Spider-Man remastered on the PlayStation 5 literally 2 months ago, because I hadn't done, I think there was one bit of downloadable content that I hadn't quite finished, and so I did that. And so I actually felt quite familiar, so immediately jumping in, like, you've got a whole load of the stuff that you have to unlock in Spider-Man 1 is already unlocked for you here. Same with Miles Morales. He's got a lot of his Venom powers. Not Venom, what do they call them? Venom powers? Scorpion
No,
powers?
they do call.
His Venom.
No, they do call them Venom powers. Confusingly, for a game that features Venom, Miles's powers are called Venom powers.
Yes. But it's actually improved in a lot of ways upon like flow for me. I think pacing seems fantastic. The combat, the variety of enemies, I think is good. They haven't got as many sort of, it seems anyway at the moment, like annoying little side quests. You haven't got a mash square to stop a car, which used to do my head in. Like every time there's like chase down this vehicle, you still do that.
You do still stop a lot of cars, but you don't mash anything to do it.
You don't have
just
to mash anything.
You just punch them once, and then they do the rest.
Yeah, like I saw the pacing of the game seems to be better, and that it seems to go from mission to as well, because this game's all you can switch between Miles and Spider-Man. But it's not in an annoying way. And if you don't want to, if you're not a completionist of side quest stuff, it does seem to flow quite nicely from character to character organically through the story. You're not like playing as Spider-Man for a really long time and then, switching over to Miles. It just seems to, you sort of pop back and forth between the two as the story develops. Like everything seems wicked. Like, I like the voice acting. I like some of the lines. There was something earlier that made me laugh because there was a line that Peter Parker says, but I can't remember. Genuinely made me laugh out loud.
I had one. It's not a spoiler, but it involves the name of a side character who I'm sure everyone. I can't remember if she was in any of the trailers. And I also don't know if it was entirely intentional. All I'll say is that Miles, I guess, quotes says a famous quote from a movie. But he says it in French, and it just so happens that this character's name is the same exact name from this movie. And yeah, do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't think I do.
Okay,
I don't think so. Maybe I missed it. I miss things
I
quite
mean,
easy.
do you have? It's so hard to, because I can't remember if she's in any of the trailers. The character I'm talking about.
In case she's not, don't say it. I think I know who you're talking about, but just in case, I don't want to.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Oh no, hold on. I think I know who you're talking about. Yeah, and it's like quite inconsequential. It's a bit of a sidey thing. It's not really that.
Oh yeah, it's really largely very inconsequential, and they're a character that were prominently featured throughout the first one in its DLC.
Oh yeah. Okay, I've got you.
Yeah. So when that person heads off somewhere, Miles says to them "au revoir" blank, which is obviously which is like bye.
No, now you say it, I'm like, of course, I totally forgot about that. But no, what I was,
I presume it was intentional.
There's a bit that I was, it's not spoilers at all, but there's a big, so I think it's when so I'm sure everyone knows at this point, but you get at some point in the game, quite early on, you get the black suit, you get infected with the symbiote as Spider-Man, and you become black suit Spider-Man, much like Spider-Man 3, the films with Tobey Maguire, in kind of a similar way. And he gets a little bit of a change in personality, and it sort of builds slowly, but he starts to get a little bit more sassy and a little bit more aggressive in some ways. And there was a bit that genuinely made me laugh out loud, which is where a big burly dude walks up to you, and he's got a massive axe, and he's got a bare head. He's wearing on his head, and he sort of walks right up to you, and he's trying to be all tough and scary. And he gets right up in your face, and Peter just stops and just whispers like, I think he says, no, I didn't know there are bears in these woods. And then he just says, I don't have any honey. And the guy just smacks him across the and I genuinely made me laugh out loud. I thought that was some very funny
Yeah.
timing and a nice little line showing kind of the how he's becoming more kind of like I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna beat the crap out of all of you. Like he
Yeah.
just starts to get a different
That's
personality.
that's the beginning of it, the transition. I will say,
Yeah.
for anyone that hears Jonesy saying that and is worried that that's the full extent of like
No. This
symbiote
is
Peter's personality, like don't worry.
no.
but
I'm at the beginning of where he's starting to get the tendrils of the symbiote are starting to affect him. The power trip
okay,
that he's on.
yeah, okay, cool.
But yeah, no, I'm really enjoying it. Like I think it's yeah, improved everywhere it needed to improve. I can I don't know where it's going to go, and I can see why I can imagine why some people have said that maybe Insomniac didn't push the envelope enough. But at the moment, I'm even if it goes where I think it's going to go, I'm going to be very, very happy with the story.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where I think you go into it with a lot of different like, possibilities in mind for areas that they could explore and narrative possibilities that they could, wander down. And as the game progresses and you see how they're handling certain characters and certain arcs, you're able to kind of like strike some of those things from the list. And it's arrived at a point for me now where I have a pretty good idea of where things are going, in much the same way that kind of happened with the first Spider-Man game. And there were always question marks over Otto Octavius, but the degree to which there was actually any real kind of uncertainty in the mix there, varied as the game progressed. Like, are they going to undermine some people's expectations, or is it actually going to be what most people are expecting? And I will say that Spider-Man 2 isn't quite as on the nose as Spider-Man 1 was in that respect. But I have my theories, and I have yet to see if all of them are right yet. But there have also been some surprises or some character arcs that I didn't expect to kind of play out in the exact way they did.
Right.
Even inside the first like third to a half of the game's narrative, they were like, okay, I didn't know that this individual was going to play that kind of a role or whatever. But yeah, I agree. I think it's a really, really, really strong game. It's kind of a tough one to talk about, right? Because like Spider-Man 2018 was really good. Miles Morales, I actually thought was better. I know that not a huge amount of people agree with me on that, but I thought it was. And then you're talking about Insomniac Games, so in the middle of all of that, also made Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, which may still, up to this point, be the best looking PlayStation 5 game on the market. They are, indisputably kind of best in class at the moment. And so I think it was kind of skill up kind of joked going into his review. You don't go into a discussion about Spider-Man 2 or even into Spider-Man 2 itself, wondering whether or not it's a good game. Instead, you're more
Yeah.
wondering like how good is it going to be, or how much better than my expectations is it going to be. And for me, some of those questions are still being answered. But I think it's a phenomenal achievement. And there's a moment extremely early on, like first couple of minutes of the game, when the game first transitions from its opening cutscene into gameplay, where you kind of have that moment where you're like, oh, like I'm in very safe hands, for want of a better way of putting it. Like, I'm playing a game that is made by people who know exactly what they're doing, the kind of game they make it, and how they want it to sing. And almost bar none, it kind of hits every note that I think it's aiming for. There were occasional things that like didn't. I don't know how you experienced this, but that didn't like always click with me immediately. As someone who hasn't played a Spider-Man game since Miles Morales released, there was kind of a bit of an intimidation factor to the number of abilities you have and the way some of them are mapped out.
Right.
And so when you get into the kind of like L1 and every single face button does something, then you get to the point where L1 and every single face button can do one of two things. R1 and every single face button can do something. Like you're dodging some stuff, then there are other attacks that you have to dodge. There are other attacks there's now a parry system that's included in there, and all of this is communicated through the color of Spidey senses. And like, yes, there's a difference between the kind of the white Spidey sense and the red Spidey sense if you're going for that perfect dodge timing, as it was in the previous games. But now there's a yellow one and a blue one, and so there's a lot going on that front. And sometimes the negative impact it's had on me is not in terms of the way my gameplay has kind of panned out. I've been happy with. Like, I've been doing fights or action sequences or set pieces and gone like, wow, that was awesome.
Yeah.
But every now and then I look at the skill tree and I think, I don't even know whether I should even unlock that because I'm not going to remember I can do it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean.
So I get that's not really a knock on the game, and you do slowly kind of absorb things into your sort of roster of abilities. But I think that is one slightly odd element, and I also think the story spins its wheels for a little while. I think one of the interesting things about playing Spider-Man 2, relative to having seen all the pre-release material for the game, both the trailers and that kind of state of play demonstration that happened during the summer, is having that mind map of where you assume certain story beats take place and where they actually take place. And yeah, obviously I can't go into any specifics on that, but some things haven't happened when I thought they would, which has led to a situation where I'm like, oh, okay, the preamble to what I thought this story was going to be all about is a lot longer than I thought it was going to be.
I had exactly the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is a little. The only maybe the criticism I would have of the story, so where I'm at so far, is it seems like they've used Kraven the Hunter as kind of a way of name checking a bunch of other characters without having to sort of fully explore them, or even talk about them that much, which is fine. Like, I get it. Like, they don't need to go into all these different characters, but they reference. There's a weird bit where they reference quite a few different villains, and you get to interact with them in a way. But they're not necessarily fully in the game, which I thought was kind of like an interesting idea.
I would have minded that a lot. Wouldn't have. I'm trying to let me phrase this right. I would have minded that a lot more than I do if those characters hadn't all played a part in the first Spider-Man game.
Yeah,
like
that's fair because you've seen their.
They didn't name drop anyone who I was going, ooh, what are they going to do with that? And then they were like, everyone they did it with was people. They were people we knew.
But for me, that the one of the things that kind of made me think like, oh, this is interesting, was because when you put together what you said about like when you first get into combat in this, you are almost at the point where you are when you leave Spider-Man 1. So you're and Miles Morales. So you have all those abilities. Some of stuff's like reduced, like your focus bar. You've only got one focus bar, etc. Things like that at the beginning. But you have like nearly all of the abilities that Pete had, and that means that you're in kind of a except for some of the gear wheel stuff. That means that you go in there and, like you said, you feel like, oh wow, I am pretty OP straight away. I can do a lot of this aerial juggling of enemies and yanking them and stuff very early on in the game. And I wondered if people coming to it who didn't play Spider-Man 1, let's say they said, oh, I'm going to buy Spider-Man 2. I never played Spider-Man 1, but I want to, I've got a PlayStation 5. I'm going to play Spider-Man 2. I wonder if they might have found it a little bit like the learning curve a little bit high, and like getting into it a little bit quick, and almost missing out on some of those characters that are nods to the first game. But you're like,
you don't. Yeah, but you don't. People can hate me for this opinion. You don't get to do that. You don't get to knowingly miss 50% of the entire story and then complain that you didn't see more of characters that featured prominently in the thing you missed.
That's fair. I mean, I had exactly the same thought around God of War. Ragnarok, because it was the same sort of the deal with that, and the way they went in was, this is a sequel. This is not. This is part 2, and I know that the people making Spider-Man, or the game dev lead or whatever, I don't know what he's called, has even said at one point recently that has effectively alluded to the third Spider-Man game in this series, in this trilogy.
Right.
Well, quadrilogy if you want to include Miles Morales as a standalone. But no, I think that's fair. Yeah, to say like you don't get to do that. You can just play Spider-Man remastered. Like if you've got, if you have PlayStation Plus, you can like get it for free.
Imagine that in any other context. Imagine someone like reading like the second book in a series, or watching the second film in a series, and then the major complaint
is
they keep skimming over all these characters and not elaborating on what they're all.
I think that's not quite the same. Oh, you're frozen. I don't know if it's me who's frozen or if it's Jamie who's frozen.
I'm back now.
You're back. You're back.
Yeah, I'm back.
I don't feel like that's fair when you're talking about.
You're mental.
When you're talking about video games, the only difference for me is you do have a lot of people that join a generation, like a PlayStation 5, PlayStation 2, PlayStation, wherever they hop in. Nowadays you could be talking about a game that came out 8 years ago on a different system.
Don't care.
All right, but I think that when you're talking about a book, there's no barrier to entry. There's no reason to not get the first entry in a series of books.
There's no reason to not get the previous Spider-Man game. if you got the PS4 version backwards compatible, if you don't want to play it, they remastered it for you.
I,
There you go.
I agree with the remaster and the fact that you can get it on PlayStation Plus for free, but I don't think that's carte blanche across gaming to say you don't get to say, oh, I didn't play the first one. Because, for example, I've never played Mass Effect 1. I went into Mass Effect 3 and was like, I want to know more about this. Went back to Mass Effect 2,
Jonesy,
mess.
Every time we bring up Mass Effect, what is the number one thing that I criticize you for to no end? Is doing exactly that. It's it blows my mind. Like, I just think that it's not arrogance, but it's entitlement to think that a game should pander to you because you decided to miss out on like a narrative thread that directly feeds into the one that you want to experience.
Do you know, it's because they used to, I think the reason I expect is because they used to do it. So one of the things they used to do with sequels a lot when I was younger was you would you'd finish the first game. When the sequel came out, they'd effectively depower you back to kind of how you were at the beginning of the first game, and then let you build up again. And so I got used to, as a gamer, that was the way games worked. They depowered you back to the first game for some silly reason. And you've gone to an area where all your power's been taken away. And so it's kind of flipping the script on me to now say, oh no, now you get everything you did in the first. I love it because I've played Spider-Man 1, I played Spider-Man Miles Morales.
There's two different things here though. There's the gameplay kind of the mechanical elements, and there's the narrative elements. I don't think pandering people pandering to people who chose not to experience something from a narrative perspective makes sense. I do think though that there is a difference between active memory and muscle memory, and using like workarounds to ease people back up to a certain point in terms of like mechanical elements makes more sense than narratively. But like, I didn't need like to pull a name out of the hat that I don't think anyone will consider a spoiler. I didn't need the first time that Scorpion was name dropped in Spider-Man 2, there to be some big flashback about, what is Insomniac Scorpion actually like, and what did he do in the first game, and what kind of run-ins did he have with Peter Parker, and what effect does his weird hallucinogenic poison. It's like, no, this is, you play it.
Fair enough. That is fair enough. And I think we don't want to retread old ground by going back. Like, yeah, if they'd have gone back and they've got all these characters out and you'd have been fighting them again, it would have been really annoying. So I do agree with you on that. I guess in some sense it's almost like a nod to the people that have played the first one, because you're kind of name checking them, but then you sort of at the same time hope that they don't just do that without introducing anyone new, I guess.
I mean, yeah,
but this is not to criticize Spider-Man 2. It's a very, very good game.
I will say that the jumping off point for that discussion was Craven, and I know some people, from what I understand, haven't been super hot on Craven, and I can kind of see why. Like, there are one-dimensional elements to him, but I think he's great. Like, I like him. Yeah, I think it's good. Yeah, it's not. I know this is a term that's like more often used to describe movies and TV shows because of like the physicality behind an actor's performance, but Craven is a surprisingly strong like on-screen presence, and you really like feel his presence in scenes when he's like either on camera or he's in the vicinity of other characters. Like, there is a genuinely imposing, threatening kind of layer to Craven where you almost like believe how strong he is, you believe how capable he might be. And I just think for how boring Craven sounds on a piece of paper prior to me seeing this rendition of him, I think they've handled it just about as well as you could handle a character who is basically some crazy Russian dude who lives for the thrill of the hunt. Like, when that's the full extent of it.
I like him a lot more than I thought I would. I think they do a good job of building how imposing he is. Like, at the beginning, I thought he was just a dude, and then by with the point I'm at, you're like, no, he's massive, he's super strong. And Peter's alluded to how like jacked and how sort of imposing he is as a dude. The only thing that I've kind of throws me a little bit is they go through these. So for people who don't know, he has this whole thing that he wants to hunt the most difficult to hunt prey, and that's so supervillains become the prey. But then some of the times and the way they've handled that has been a little bit like a bit of a damp squib for me, without giving anything away. But
okay, I can think about what you're talking about.
But then, to be fair, like I can't think of a better way that they could have done it without trying to take too much of the game for just for a cutscene. So actually, to be fair to them, I think they've probably done it in the best way they could have done it.
That's the thing, yeah. And it's also like what I liked about those elements is there are consequences of Craven's actions that are definitive. And I think sometimes one of the criticisms people have of superhero media is that they stray away from more definitive actions or more definitive narrative decisions because everything kind of needs to be carte blanche for the next story arc or the next game or whatever it is. Like you never take a card off the table outright. And one of the things they do use Craven for, without being too, sort of indiscreet in discussing him, is that Craven takes cards off the table, and you're like, right, okay, like that.
Yes,
Interesting.
that to me was talking about Insomniac being brave in their decision making. I think that he's a good character to take cards off the table. Like they've done a very good job of going, no, that's done, and you're like, oh, okay,
yeah,
fair. I didn't realize you're going to go that hard on it.
Yeah.
I've had, talking about the wider game, I've had a couple of, and to be fair, it's not really played out. I had a couple of bugs early on, which I was a little bit worried about.
I've had a few as well.
Because some of the, like one of them that I had super early on was, I don't know if you class it as game breaking, because I could go back and restart the last checkpoint, but I literally I think was fighting Sandman in the first 5 minutes. I glitched out, got stuck in an invisible wall, and then could do nothing. And I was just like,
man, that sucks.
This doesn't look good for the rest of the game. But luckily, I think I haven't had anything else that bad. I've had a couple of issues whereby the swinging mechanic seems to just go freak out on me for no apparent reason, but that's few and far between. It doesn't happen often. But no, apart from that, it's little annoying things like, I think Insomniac have had this before with other games whereby they're the boxes around collectibles, I would love it if they were bigger, because I'm like trying to hit triangle and it's just like I've got to be in exactly the right goddamn position. And I'm like,
I'll second that massively. And
it's so annoying. I'm like, just make the box bigger that you can sense that I'm in the right area in, and like I don't need to be on top of it looking in exactly the right place. Like, come on.
Yeah, especially when there's a system where if a character's talking at the same time, you have to wait for them to finish talking before you press triangle, and they kind of dull the glow of the interactable kind of elements to indicate that you can't interact with them quite yet. But when you combine that with the fact that, like Jonesy said, the game can be really pedantic sometimes about where you're standing or how close or how far away even sometimes you are from certain things before you can interact with them. I have at least one case where I thought an interactable item was bugged, but luckily it wasn't. I just had to wait. And just a couple of other random things, like there are some collectibles where after you do the collectible, you get kind of a voice note or voice message from someone. And one time there was like a 20-second gap between me doing a thing and me hearing that message. I had a situation where this weird sort of like staticky yellow electricity thing that certain enemies can do to the player character as a kind of a status effect. The visual element of it stayed with me into the next scene, so I was walking around in cutscenes with like this yellow sparks flying all up me. Yeah, and I also had one the only other one I had, which I just had to run away from, and then because it was in the open world, was I was doing a crime, and I had to kill all these enemies, and at the end I had to destroy a turret that was on top of a truck. But I had already destroyed the turret prior, so my objective was to destroy a turret that I already destroyed, and I couldn't progress. But because it was an open world crime, I just had to run away and move on with my life. So the minor bugs with zero consequences is what I've experienced so far, but not bug free.
No. We come to an interesting thing about that. So one thing which I do really like that Insomniac did this and have said this, and this is just a given in some titles, fair enough, but they've come out and said that on the disc is the entire game, and there are no patches required. You do not need to be online. You can buy the disc, you can play the game. It's a single player standalone console experience, which I love. I love that. I get that doesn't work for some games. I'm not suggesting that should be every title that comes out, and like there are a couple of bugs as we've said, but you could go buy this disc, get completely cut off of the internet and have a phenomenal time, and you're going to get a little bit frustrated with a couple of silly little bugs that I'm sure they'll patch at some point, but it's not going to cause you any issues, really. Yeah,
fundamentally you're right. The on disc experience day one is totally playable, which is it was great to see. I did pull out some news stories this week. Apparently some players in some parts of the world have been facing issues where the game isn't installing properly from the disc itself. But it seems like those issues have been largely affecting players in mainland Europe, specifically Romania, the Netherlands, and Malta. So I don't know if it was one specific kind of region, whether that's like to do with where those discs were manufactured, or or it's just a certain batches that were sent to certain parts of the world. But I'd imagine it's actually a pretty small issue, considering, from what I understand, neither PlayStation nor Insomniac have directly commented on it yet, and I haven't. The problem hasn't become pervasive enough that, like, a significant number of people are screaming from the rooftops about it. So hopefully that's a very isolated incident, and this becomes a game that, yeah, if you have a boxed physical, copy of Spider-Man 2, you can kind of put it in the museum and know that game will work forever on PlayStation 5 hardware, theoretically, internet connection or not, servers or not, so that's cool.
The only other thing I will criticize a little bit, and this isn't a criticism actually of Insomniac or development. This is just like a personal thing. I think some of the direction with some of the models, I'm not, of the characters, I'm like a little bit like, they must be choices, but I'm just like, I'd like, and I know this is, like I said, it's going to be personal, because for example, like Miles, I think they've, I really like Into the Spider-Verse, and now in my head I've got like that kind of younger, skinnier kind of model of Miles, and in this he's quite thick, and I was just, and he looks a lot older.
He is not thick. He's
when he's rocking around in his not Spider-Man suit, he's like a lot thicker and bigger.
He wears like baggier clothing, but when he's in the Spider-Man suit, he is like, dude
looks 25. He looks, and Peter still looks like the same age. I don't know. But that's just a personal thing. From like, you take the Into the Spider-Verse like age gap and difference, and then to this, that's like I said, purely a personal thing. I think.
Okay. When you said models, I thought you were going to be talking about like the NPCs on the streets and stuff.
No. This is. I think the only other one was, I'd seen some criticism about like Mary Jane looks a bit weird in this one, and she does a little bit maybe, but like nothing that is that terrible. I really like what they've done with, again, this is just personal. This isn't an actual criticism. Young Spider-Man. There's a couple of like flashbacky stuff. And you get to see young Spider-Man, young Peter Parker.
Like high school era.
And he looks like Tom Holland, which I love. Like, he does look like Tom Holland.
You know what? I would love to tell everyone that Jonesy's like buying into some internet conspiracy theory, but I had the exact same thought. Like, high school Peter Parker in this game looks a lot more like Tom Holland than his actual model does.
I will be a little bit sappy as well and say some of the sort of side quest, or even main quest, like story adjacent things, like the flashback. You go on a bike ride. There's a section where you play as a character, and from their perspective, the world seems different.
I know which one you're talking about. Yeah,
I loved that.
Really nice, really well judged and handled. Yeah,
very well judged. Now, except for the ending, which did my head in. Which I'm not going to say because I want people to go into it fresh and enjoy it.
Of course.
I'll tell you after why. I know you'll be like, "Oh, you're so." But there was another. There's a side quest where you're collecting some things that have been taken, and you get to facilitate something happening which probably wouldn't have happened, and then you get to walk around and sort of just have a little bit of an experience, just reading up about things. And I thought that was a lovely touch, a nice little. Side quest mission with a nice little payoff. And often with some of the side quests, when you get to like the end of a little string of side quests, there might be like a special suit that you get, which I think is a fantastic little reward and a bonus for following a thread to its conclusion, which I thought was great.
Although I don't know if you had this problem, but my brain is not letting me change some, like, especially after
Black Suit Spider-Man.
Because
I'm not changing that.
Well, yeah, because it's like, so for anyone that doesn't know, the game continues to let you customize and change suits after Peter gets the symbiote suit. But like, I feel like it wouldn't make sense to. I don't want a cutscene of like symbiote Peter doing something knobheadish while I'm like dressed as like, I don't. Some people think the suits are spoilers, so I won't specify. But yeah, dressed in something else.
No, I'm completely with you. I unlocked a very cool suit earlier. Which comes with some bonuses.
Okay, yeah, bonuses that might involve like toggles in an option menu.
Very accurate they are. And I was like, okay, that's fantastic, but I can't do anything with them yet because I'm in the black symbiote suit, so I've got no intention of changing that.
At the end of the game, when I have to do like side mission cleanups, this will be great. But for now.
Whereas with Miles, I go to town. Like, I love all his suits. His customizables are fantastic. Like, he has suits with like, he's wearing shorts and a puffer jacket with like headphones on and all that. I think I prefer Miles in this game to Peter. Even though you get to do the power fantasy thing of being Black Suit Spider-Man, I
Yeah.
prefer his character at this point and his arcs and stuff he
Well,
does. They've managed to, weirdly as well. I don't know if you've had this. I feel like they feel different. They don't feel this. They do the same things. They have similar moves.
the animations are different. Like swinging is different between the two of them, and you kind of feel that kind of almost like slightly less fluid, like slightly less experienced, but at the same time slightly more stylish and
Yeah,
like attitudey feeling from Miles, like
which
in the way
is
he kind of swings and twists.
very subtle, but has quite a profound impact on
Totally,
how you feel when
totally.
you play as each character, which is fantastic. Like, yeah, um,
I,
yeah,
I was going to say that was
sorry.
the reason I connected with Miles Morales more than 2018 in a lot of ways, because there was that kind of like there was that feeling at times of like Miles's attachment to some members of his family, to his community, to his friends. Like the idea that like this is a kid from that area who's still going to school around there. Not that Peter felt necessarily detached from the city, but like Miles feels embedded within a community a lot more than Peter does a lot of the time, and some of that means that some of the things he does kind of hit home a little bit more. But it is interesting still that Spider-Man 2 story, as far as in the amount of it that I've played, skews towards Peter's experiences more than like Miles is there, obviously. He's Spider-Man, but the thrusts of the main narrative revolve around Peter's life more than Miles's. From what I've seen so far, and I'm curious to see if like how that will change when it does. There's ways in which I know it almost has to,
Yeah.
because there are loose threads.
It's
But yeah,
funny because
it's interesting.
I,
Yeah,
I'm so into like seeing where the story goes. Even like saying like apparently it's quite safe in what they've done. I'm super into it. Like I'm super into seeing what happens and where it goes.
yeah. Also, gonna ask you because I know that when I told you what Skill Up said about them, you kind of thought, okay, I can kind of get behind that. Web wings, yay or nay?
Love them.
Yeah, they're awesome.
They're fantastic. The I thought they were going to be. I mean, maybe it's blasphemous even to mention these two games in the same breath. But when you come to like Gotham Knights and you unlock the abilities, to traverse in different ways in that game. You kind of like it's like once you've got your your traversal ability, you just sack off the bike because why would you use it, right? It's just so much easier to glide around in the sky, and you're zipping and gliding, and then when you get fast travel, it's like why would I traverse when I can just fast travel? Like it's one of those.
Yeah,
I have not found that at all with this. Like the web wings and the point jump and the swinging and everything just so beautifully integrates that you just find yourself flipping and gliding and jumping and leaping, and yeah, it just gives you so many options to travel in such a cool way. And
yeah.
I still find myself holding square and doing like spins and flips while I'm like going
Same.
around the city. It's
Yeah,
just
I say
yeah, no, the wings don't detract at all from me. I
no.
even love them when it comes to doing the annoying sections that used to kind of bug me when you go into areas with very little, barely any buildings. Like Central Park used to be really
Hmm.
annoying in Spider-Man because it's quite a frustrating way to travel, and you just find yourself wrapping X to like zip forward all the time. This is giving
Yes.
you a way. Hold L2, hold X, launch yourself from a couple of trees, get some speed, web wings, and you can cover Central Park in like really cool Spider-Man fashion and just feel
Yeah,
badass when you do it.
and at really high speeds. And I know, like we
Super
talked
fast.
about that before release about how Insomniac have talked about the swing speed, excuse me, potentially being limited by hard drive speed or now SSD speed, and the extent to which they can take advantage of the like again, I know some people get angry when it's brought up, but like the PlayStation 5 supposedly very bespoke solid state drive, but you do see that when you take some like the mega slingshots or whatever they're called and
Yeah.
go directly into the web wings or catch a wind tunnel, and you're like, no, this is many multiple times faster than some of the regular swinging was in the previous game, and it keeps up. It keeps up all the time for a game where there is a fidelity mode and a performance mode, and there's variable refresh rate support with a 40 frames a second mode and all this kind of stuff. There's ray tracing in every single mode, and you're like, I'm moving through the city at twice, three times the speed than I ever have before. And that's one of the things that I think that technically like never ceases to impress me is that it's a game that has to function on both a really surprisingly minute scale to this really unbelievably macro scale, to the point where some people will, at points, I don't know if you've done this, but they will go down to the street level, they will walk across down the street, and they'll press square because Spider-Man does like finger guns and like salutes at people when you hit the attack button and you're going past NPCs. And everything has to look good, and the crowds have to be dense, and the traffic has to be dense, and you can't see too many repeating NPCs and stuff like that, and the environment has to be detailed and so on and so forth. And then in a moment's notice, you have to be able to support the person flinging themselves hundreds of miles an hour through the air, skyscrapers flying past, where every single window in that skyscraper has ray trace reflections of every single part, and the fact that it just does it all, like, it is really quite remarkable. And every time I find something a little bit finicky, like I find like I couldn't quite jump to where I wanted to jump, or like I couldn't get to the exact ledge I wanted to, or there's some part of it where like, oh, that character model like could look better, I'm reminded that no, there are very few games that have to deal with like the minute and the macro in such like extremely dense and detailed ways simultaneously, with fractions of a second between the two. Like, not to name names, but you think about how much loading Starfield does relative to how little loading, how no, like almost like how no loading Spider-Man 2 does, and that's not a comparison that's helpful because they're very different games trying to do very different things. But sometimes it is just like, I don't know what Insomniac do over there. I don't know what they feed their employees for breakfast in the morning, but it's freakish. It's not perfect, but it's just it's really quite stunning at times.
Although you say all of that, hundreds of miles an hour, super fast through the city, but sometimes it's just not fast enough to catch a van, which is quite annoying. Oh, have you frozen again?
You froze for me, but I'm back. Can you repeat what you're saying? Sorry.
Yeah, I said that all been said, and how you can travel really quickly, but sometimes it's just not quite quick enough to catch a van going through the streets of New York City.
No, well, it's funny because that push and pull becomes even more noticeable, hasn't it? Where you can feel like they need this chase to last this amount of time. At the 15-second mark, you're going to really quickly catch up with them because that's the amount of time they've determined that a chase needs to last.
Yeah.
But you can't in the time between. Yeah,
those vans are doing like 200 miles an hour around tight turns in a very built-up city. Those drivers, mate, those drivers are pretty tasty.
Oh, apart from when like you accidentally hit a wall or hit a bridge or something and fall to the ground and you're not swinging anymore, then all of a sudden that van's doing 20 miles an hour to make sure it doesn't get too far away from you.
I actually chased one car and realised that it was actually just doing laps around the same block. But it was a really tight block. So I did the couple of times, I messed up and then realised, oh, hold on, it's just going exactly the same route. So I just went to where it was going to be. And then I was like, okay, now I've got it. This was like earlier on in the game. But no, but those things are few and far between. I've realised that we haven't actually mentioned some of the sort of facts that about Spider-Man, how well it's done in the
indeed
this first week. Because I think the one thing that I saw today, which was I hadn't realised until I saw the headline, was that it's now the fastest selling game PlayStation Studios have ever done in 24 hours. Right, sold the most in 24 hours.
Well,
which is a phenomenal achievement.
They're calling it the fastest selling game in their history. What we do know is that they've sold through 2.5 million copies in the first 24 hours. That it gets a little bit muddier when you think that the last time they declared a game the fastest selling game at launch was Ragnarok. And at the time, they told us it was 5.1 million copies in its debut week. So they are using different time frames for the two as a means of like, hey, if we stop the clock now, then Spider-Man 2 is still technically selling the fastest selling PlayStation Studios game in history. But if it doesn't sell like another 2.6 million copies in the next 5 days, 4 or 5 days, then it might not be as far. It depends how you rate fast. Like it's, I guess basically.
But you've got to imagine,
but it's still very good.
Yeah, there's more people who've got PlayStation 5s now than had when Ragnarok came out, and it's not exactly.
But Ragnarok was cross-platform.
Oh yeah, no, of course, because that's one thing to me. It's a real shame that this is not cross-platform. I would love it if more people got to play.
There's
the
the sympathetic part of me that's like, yes, more people should be able to play Spider-Man 2 without having to buy new hardware. There's also the unapologetic part of me that's like, I don't want to know what Spider-Man 2 looks like if Insomniac have to account for the PlayStation 4. We need, like, generations need to move on at some point. As
Yeah.
Jim Ryan once famously lied, we believe in generations. Um,
But even a bit, I mean, even like across Xbox, you know, XS, like across PC,
oh,
like every, like it's. I do sometimes get that where I'm like, I get it, I get it. It's business. This is how games work. But at the same time, my friends who don't have a PlayStation, I'm just like, I want to say, have you played Spider-Man? And they're like, oh no, I haven't got a PlayStation. And I think like,
yeah,
games, man. But no, it's the way of
game,
the world. It's
yeah.
the way of the world.
And there are things to be playing at the moment.
This is
It's
very
worth
true.
noting that while Spider-Man 2 was supposedly comfortably the number one bestseller here in the UK this past week, it was Super Mario Brothers Wonder that unsurprisingly secured second place. For anyone wondering, we're talking about the UK only and physical only because that's just about the only stats you can get on a short-term notice, on a short-term basis when it comes to actual game sales. Spider-Man 2 is reportedly the fourth biggest launch in the UK, behind Tears of the Kingdom, EA Sports FC 24, and Hogwarts Legacy. Um, so, pretty good company to be keeping, it must be said.
Yes.
I don't think anything there. Hogwarts Legacy was, a kind of just it just blew people. It just came storming out the gates as an unbelievably fast selling game. EA Sports, FIFA has always been one of the best selling games, if not the best selling game in the UK and across all of Europe, because that's just the popularity of football here. And in Tears of the Kingdom, to be fair, I didn't actually remember that was sold quite as well as it did, but it doesn't surprise me at all.
No. But so this on PlayStation? They're saying, because obviously, like we said, PlayStation. So this is only PlayStation 5, but are they comparing like FC 24 across?
FC 24 and Hogwarts Legacy would have been combined across all platforms. So in
Okay,
theory, Tears of the Kingdom and Spider-Man 2 are more impressive in that sense
because the
as
only
single
single
platform
system ones,
releases.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that EA Sports and FC and Hogwarts Legacy are 1 and 2 in the UK at the moment. If I'm not mistaken.
No, that makes sense. Like I say,
So
across more platforms, that totally makes sense. And as you said, very good company to be keeping. Like nothing to be turning your nose up at.
yeah, and Spider-Man 2 is going to continue to sell. And I'm sure as PlayStation 5s continue to fly off shelves, there'll be a bunch more this Christmas, as there always are year on year. Spider-Man 2 will continue to fly off shelves, and those players also have other things to look forward to, as Insomniac have confirmed they're working on a new Game Plus mode and a mission replay feature, which are expected to be added to the game in an update later this year. I'm going to be honest, Jonesy, again, like I'm not just trying to suck this game's dick, although I know I'm kind of doing that a little bit. I don't usually care for something like a mission replay feature completely removed from like my progression through a game's narrative. But there is this feeling sometimes, I don't know if you've had this too with Spider-Man 2, where no matter how innocuous a mission looks like when it's sat there in the mission menu or on the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man app, when you're looking at it, you know that like in half an hour's time, the most outrageously over the top, cinematic, explosive, bombastic set piece is going to be going off. Buildings are going to be crumbling all around you. Like trains are going to be flying off the tracks. Like some like outrageous super villain is going to be doing this, that, or the other, and Spider-Man's just barely going to be holding it all together with like one web in their hand, and you're going to go, Jesus Christ! Like this would be the focal point, like the center point for almost any other game on the market out there, and yet Spider-Man seems to do this every other mission.
That has actually blown me away. How many set pieces there are, how many amazing cutscenes there are. It's one thing I did see people criticizing, and I think this was before the game came out, was like use of QTEs and saying like, oh, how are we still using QTEs? But I found myself thinking like, this game is so ram full of really cool events and really exciting things. If you didn't include the occasional QuickTime event, I'm just going to be watching it like a Kojima style cutscene. I don't. There's nothing wrong with I'm glad I'm involved at some level with the occasional QuickTime event. I don't think that's a negative at all. And the way that they stuff this game full of, like you said, just amazing set pieces which seem to just happen all the time around loads of different things as well. Like the pacing, genuinely, the pacing of this game is like, wow, this is like a movie in the way that it's like. Chill, big epic thing, and you're like, okay, this isn't just for the main like massive story beats. It doesn't just happen 3 times in the whole game. You're going to see this again and again and again. And chuck me in a QuickTime event. Why the hell not?
Absolutely, no, I couldn't agree more. I've taken that stance I can even remember that being a conversation 5 years ago around the release of the first Spider-Man game, and my feelings echo yours exactly. Um,
How else do you
so
interact? How else do you? This is one thing I was thinking. How the one thing they have introduced here is the what do you call it? The triggers that have resistance on the PlayStation 5, like the
oh yeah,
what do they call that? There's a
it's
name that they've
it's
given it,
it's
isn't there?
something. What are the triggers called?
Whatever they
Um,
are, whatever they're called. You have a thing now whereby you have to pull them and get them into the right zone of two bars, and they'll be different for R2 and L2, which is a nice use of the haptics and a nice use of the resistance that the triggers offer. And it is, yeah, it's different to like just hitting square.
Adaptive.
Adaptive. Thank you. It's a nice use of that adaptive trigger functionality. But again, like I don't want to do that every time, So occasionally I'm going to wrap square. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, but they don't overdo it. It's always context sensitive. It's always, as you said, better than watching it. And while some people love to perpetuate this idea that doing something as a QTE means not doing it yourself, there are sequences in this game and others like it that are just like they're not they couldn't be recreated through gameplay. Like the systems and the mechanics that the gameplay revolves around wouldn't allow for what you're seeing to take place. Like it has to be a cinematic of some kind. And it's just a question of whether or not you want to be involved in that. And in my answer
Totally
always
agree.
skews towards yes. Um, well, Jonesy, it seems then, according to not just you and I, but most of the voices around the internet, critics and otherwise, that Spider-Man 2 has been something of a success so far, and Insomniac's track record keeps up, and their ability to continue to churn out high-quality sequels remains unquestioned. However, there are other studios, developers, publishers out there whose ability to continue to churning out high-quality sequels that either experiment with the formula in interesting ways or mix things up in interesting ways are sometimes found to be lacking. And I don't know how many people know that I'm talking about Ubisoft at this point, but spoiler alert, I'm talking about Ubisoft. Which is why, when I read this report on what could be happening to the future of the Far Cry series, I thought I'd pull it out and get your feelings, Jonesy, because there's some potentially interesting stuff here in terms of how Ubisoft might be seeking to make a slightly different Far Cry game, if you'd like to hear it.
Definitely would. I want to see if they can make good on the progression of the Far Cry series.
Well, it's interesting. Again, I don't know if you'll consider this a make good or like a right hand turn that was much needed or something in between. But for anyone wondering, this all comes from Insider Gaming and our old pal Tom Henderson, whose track record on Ubisoft stuff is, I mean, it's pretty damn spotless. So I'm inclined again, rumors, confirmed rumors, whatever you want to call them. I'm inclined to believe that everything that we're about to talk about is true up to a certain point. That point being that we're talking about something that is 2 to 3 years away, and a lot can change in not a lot of time in the games industry. But the game that we'll probably just refer to as Far Cry 7 is internally known as Project Blackbird. It's scheduled for release in fall of 2025, but remains to be seen how likely that actually is. It's been developed by Ubisoft Montreal and will move away from the Dunia engine and over to Snowdrop. And this is where things get a little bit interested, Jonesy, and I thought this might pique your interest. You ready?
Yeah, go
It's
for it.
understood that the next entry to the series will be a non-linear story that centers around rescuing the player's kidnapped family. It was said the game's plot revolves around a wealthy family that has been kidnapped by a conspiracy group currently called the Sons of Truth. The premise of the campaign is for the player to rescue their entire family within a specific time frame. Currently, the in-game timer stands at 72 hours or 24 hours in real time, but the timer can be paused when the player enters one of their safe houses. Far Cry 7's non-linear story means that family members do not need to be rescued in order. Some family members can be killed, which has an impact on the story. And to find your family members, the game will introduce a new interrogation mechanic, which doesn't necessarily mean you'll get the information from you'll need, because enemies can sometimes lie, stay quiet, or even escape. But looks as though they're trying to frame it around this idea of like, hey, let's put a 24-hour real-time clock in the game, have the player's family be kidnapped by a conspiracy group, and have you take a non-linear approach to Far Crying your way towards getting your family back together.
If they pull it off, if
Yeah.
that so immediately, of course, my mind goes to 24. Right, Jack Bauer,
Okay. Yeah.
24. if
Ooh,
if they pull it off and and you have like the clock, and I can imagine there's times when it will get front and center and there'll be a sound effect as it's counting down, that could be absolutely phenomenal. And a way to tie that into a Far Cry game completely makes sense, because Far Cry is all about, for me anyway, is how do you go about capturing areas, how do you go about getting people. It's big and loud, and do you go in guns blazing, or do you go
yeah.
in quiet and stealthy and take out the alarm and then move your way in? When you've got an actual real world timer telling you, oh no, this is counting down, that sounds like it could be so much fun.
But here's the question: we were talking earlier about how you've not even finished previous Far Cry games because of your tendency to like want to take the completionist approach, put off
Oh,
main story missions to do side stuff. If this is a game that still has side things, distractions, but there's a clock ticking the whole time, how does that fit? Does that work?
it might make it much better, because I'm gonna feel compelled to follow the main story. I can imagine that where this could fall to pieces is if this game is finishable in, say, 10, 12 hours.
Right.
Because the problem they're going to have is they can't make, if the clock is 24 hours real time, they can't make a 20-hour game, because
Agreed.
too many people are not just simply not going to finish it,
Yeah.
exactly for the reason you've said. So you're going to have something maybe like a 15-hour game, that is going to allow people the time to act to, realistically most people to finish it. Because if you get to the point of which you are 3 hours behind the main story and you've got an hour to go, you can't reload a save.
Oh, yeah.
You're done. If
Like, yeah. I was going to say, I was imagining a scenario where you were playing the game, you looked up a YouTube video of someone completing it, and you realized it took them 10 hours to get from where you are to the end of the game, and you've got 8 hours left. Like, you just have to abandon.
short or well, or do you go, this is my time to shine, and you try and do it on speed, like quicker than the YouTuber did it? I No, I think this sounds like a fantastic idea. It I think it's really tricky in execution, and especially when it comes to. Oh no, but hold on. Maybe I'm getting this wrong, because I'm suggesting that obviously you get 24-hour timer, but we've said you said family members can die, changes the course of the events. So maybe any finish to the game, any end to the game is the end of the game. So when you get to, let's say you
True,
don't
right.
have time to save your, I guess maybe it's your wife left. Let's say you don't have time to save your wife. The game finishes and you've saved two kids, the nan, your mother-in-law, Uncle Bob, and then your wife, and a couple of cousins die, and then you do another
Yeah.
run through and see if you can save more people. Actually, yeah, maybe no, maybe that's
Different endings based on who's there.
different endings exactly. Almost to anyone who's played Starfield, there's a point at which you kind of can see a rundown of how well you've done in the game so far, and it gives you a little like, oh, this is the outcome of what happened. I love that. I thought that was fantastic, like a little narrative thing that said, oh, this is what happened to this person because you did this. It almost reminds me a little bit of an extrapolated version of Army of Two, where you didn't kill the tiger and then the tiger goes on to maul the family. Like,
Yeah.
I like that narrative, like I don't know what you call it, but where they take the narrative out to its extreme and say this is what happened. Yeah, if they include some of that, I'm all for it. And it gives me reason to play again. It gives me reason not to get distracted with the side quests, as you said, like I often do.
Yeah.
It could the execution might be the problem, I suppose.
Right, and I guess that's where it's going to be an interesting thing. Where, like, obviously, it's hard to know when we're going to find out more about this. Ubisoft have been pretty sporadic when it comes to game announcements. The article I was reading for this pointed out that the Division 3 was actually randomly announced in a PR email like a handful of weeks ago. I wonder how many people even kind of properly registered that in their minds that the Division 3 has been announced, and like that. That's just so when we see any form of this or any semblance of this rearing its head, and what it looks like when we do, it remains to be seen. But I guess, yeah, I feel like it's poignant that you didn't touch any of Far Cry 6, right?
No, I
Um,
didn't know.
which, again, like they put a lot of time and money um
Let's
into hyping up that game's release. Like they had
Wow, damn, they actually did. I was going to be mean about Ubisoft and say that they don't even market games anymore, but actually, Far Cry 6, they
like,
went
like
hard on their marketing for Far
Gian,
Cry 6.
Giancarlo Esposito's face was on everything
Yeah.
for a long time. It felt like, but then that game kind of came out. It felt like not that many people were actually drawn in by that marketing. Reviews were kind of middling, certainly for the high points of the Far Cry series, even if they were many years behind them by that point. And then it felt like, because I want to say Far Cry 6 is even in like the PlayStation, like
It's
you can
free now on
basically play it for
PlayStation
free,
Plus,
yeah.
yeah.
And I wonder how many people who would are self-admitted us like Far Cry fans still haven't even really gone in because they've just got no impetus at the moment to play another Far Cry game.
So
Um,
I must admit, I looked at it the other day and nearly downloaded it. And the only reason I
okay,
didn't was because of storage space, but it was one that is
well,
definitely now on my it's on my to-do list. So it's one that I'm like, okay, once I've done with Spider-Man, once I've finished with a little bit extra like Starfield stuff, it's definitely there. It's definitely on my to-do list. It's not that I don't want to play it. Far Cry 5, I had a really good time with Far Cry 5. It it definitely lost me in some of its narrative toward the end, and that like family biblical, like, which the only thing that worries me about this game is it kind of sounds a little bit more like Far Cry 5. Like, it doesn't sound like Far Cry 3, it sounds more like Far Cry 5, and I fell off the story with Far Cry 5 quite early on.
okay.
So that's the only thing that makes me wonder.
Uh, I can see that. Yeah, if yeah, certainly if you didn't gel or vibe with Far Cry 5, then that would be a concern. I felt like Far Cry 5 was a little bit more um well received by fans than the direction, because 6 tried to get it back into that idea of like sort of a lush or like would be paradise, but strife with civil uprising and unpleasant leader figures and
Yeah,
extremely charismatic but thoroughly unpleasant leaders. Um, but I kind of liked Far Cry 5's kind of almost like I wanted it to go harder, ironically, but I kind
right.
of like the idea of this sort of like cultish family that had all these people kind of under a, well, what I hoped was a figurative spell, but I think at points became clear that it was more of a literal spell in a lot of different ways. Um, like I didn't love it to the extent that when like some of those ideas came back in that New Dawn or whatever it's called, that in between game, like, or when the father from Far Cry 5 was one of the people who got his own piece of DLC, I think, following Far Cry 6, the ones that focused on the villains. I was like, okay, he's not like a Vars or a Pagan Min. He was okay. But at the same time, like, if they see it as an opportunity to loop back around again, when it's described as a conspiracy group called the Sons of Truth, I start licking my lips because there's so much potential material there. I just know that there's a part of me that's worried that they're going to do what they did in Far Cry 5, get a little bit scared about treading on anyone's toes or stepping a little bit too closely to something or ideas or beliefs or groups or systems or individuals that, some people in their player base or targeted player base might even, adhere to or like or subscribe to or whatever the case may be. And so they don't pull the trigger on that, and they kind of take the slightly softer, gentler approach. But I say, fuck it. Like,
I'm with you. I'm totally with you. I think they should go harder. Like, one of the things that not worries me, but like makes me think they're not going to go hard enough is to call it something like the Sons of Truth. That sounds a
I
bit
know.
too like wishy-washy. Like, oh, these are a weird group you would hear about online. I think they should call them like, take something out of like every day and make it sound like it could be. I don't know what that would be like in the for the modern age, but yeah, call it
The
something.
Proud Men. Just
Yeah,
change one word.
yeah, like exactly. Take something like that. Take something out of like a current trends. But although saying that, Ubisoft have been burnt with that before, haven't they? So maybe that's why they're
Yeah,
staying clear.
Jesus. There probably is someone at the very top of Ubisoft who's like, I can see why you want to make this political, but don't make this political. Set it
Yes.
in a fictional. Make it a fictional conspiracy group. Set it in a fictional state. Make sure there are people of all ethnicities on both sides of every argument, and just don't wade into those waters.
But see, I don't want them to like pick on one group necessarily. Like, I don't think that I have no like political bent when it comes to games. But I would love it if they picked up things like if the conspiracy group, it was like flat Earth, anti-vax, like all of this sort of stuff. Like, you know, any current conspiracy theorists, like even stuff that may, I mean, you know, maybe it's too soon, but even like stuff that's going on in the world at the moment, like you know, just go over all of that stuff and just put it all together, and just try and, you know, like the government, the man, JFK assassinations. Like I would want it to be like conspiracy theorists, like, or conspiracy theories. Just lump them all together. It doesn't have to be one family drug den, you know, using magic. It can just kind of be this all-encompassing conspiracy theory thing, I think, because the world seems to be rammed full of them at the moment. Like you could easily do it,
Yeah,
and you don't even have to pick one political side. Both sides seem to be nuts with conspiracy theories these days, so you could go hard.
There's crazy everywhere you look in
There is.
2023.
There
Jonesy.
is.
Some people probably even see it in us.
Mate, we would shill all day long if we got paid by the state.
Yeah, probably.
Got paid enough.
If the price is right, you know, everyone's got a number in mind.
Rise of Kong is the best game ever. IGN shouldn't have given.
Again, folks, we patreon.com/SuperShow. We haven't got a we shit will shill for your product tier in there yet, but if anyone wants to recommend it's created or set the price, then you know, we're open to topics. Jonesy, in fact, has actually been doing active, unpaid shilling work for the past decade now on behalf of Cloud Imperium Games, haven't you, Jonesy?
I have, and I will continue to do so forevermore.
Do you know what I will say? I'm not sure how many people who are around today were there to see it at the time, but the time that you streamed Star Citizen on Twitch, which for me, and I think for many other people at the time, was the first time we just sat down and watched like a couple of hours of like, okay, this is what it means when someone says they are quote unquote playing Star Citizen that would have been 2020, I'm guessing. Fascinating to watch. Of particular interest was when I think you bought, I think, a food or a drink item, and you went into third person to see the animation of your character drinking the can or whatever it was, and your head was missing. That bit stands out for me.
Yeah, there's many things that stand out for Star Citizen. Yeah, whether it's like clipping through the side of your ship when you're going at the speed of light and losing it permanently, or you know, getting on a lift and just getting like stuck in a door and your head disappearing. Yeah. Lots of.
I don't mean
times.
to play backseat game dev, Jonesy, but it sounds to me what that game might be missing is just a little bit of polish, which actually brings us nicely to the main reason we're talking about Star Citizen again today, and that's because its standalone single-player campaign, known as Squadron 42, if its name rings a bell, you'll find out why shortly, is now, quote-unquote, feature complete, according to Cloud Imperium Games. So if you're wondering why you might have heard of this title, Squadron 42 was originally announced for release in 2014, but has been delayed multiple times. A beta release was scheduled at one point for mid-2020, before that too was delayed, and then later in 2020, Jonesy's old pal Chris Roberts admitted that the game was still a way off from the beta phase. I don't know if we're now entering a phase that they're calling beta, but we are now obviously over 3 years on from even that point, and Squadron 42 has reared its head again during this year's CitizenCon, along with a development video, and it is being described as being in the polish phase. I've got a quote here, which means extra emphasis on ensuring that things feel fun. I'm not much of an expert when it comes to making video games, but apparently them being fun is of some importance to some players. The studio is working on a number of features, including AI, narrative, and cinematics, and while there was no mention of a release window, quote, "When we have the locked release date, you will be the first to know," Robert said. And then another great quote that I know Jonesy's a big fan of: "The polish phase can take some time."
So yeah, 9 years past original release date, 11 years past announcement date when they actually started making the thing, and now they've said they've entered polish phase, which can take some time.
I've got. I was because I have to ask. Like, for as much as I like to dunk on you for your experiences with Star Citizen and how you've kind of backed it, both, you know, sort of like just casually, but also at times even financially. You know, let's put all our cards on the table.
Mate, I already own Squadron 42.
Well, there you go. So you're better positioned than anyone else I know personally to separate the wheat from the chaff when it comes to the stuff that comes out of Chris Roberts' mouth. Does any of this move the needle for you at all, or do you do you think we're getting close to something here?
Are we getting close to something here? I don't think this suggests to me that it's coming any quicker than it was.
Okay.
But one thing that does make a difference, and I do think this is the important part for me. So, Star Citizen, for me, the entire issue with Star Citizen was feature creep, and to be feature complete suggests that they are no longer adding any more features, and that is the one thing they needed to do in order to actually start to get toward a finished video game.
Yeah.
And to be fair to them, like, I suppose feature creep in a project usually occurs when you try and, incorporate load more stuff, and it just grows and grows and grows, and it gets absolutely like a behemoth that you can't sort of rein back in. It was part of their production process when they had their tiers and they had their milestones. They said, if we reach this milestone of funding, we will include this feature. If we reach this next milestone, we will include this next feature. And I think the problem they had was they made so much money that if you continue out ad infinitum about the milestones, they were paid to do feature creep, and that is the death knell of any game production for me, because it's like, you end up like, if you think the most elaborate game in the world, it's almost like saying, well, we're just going to reinvent the world inside of a video game, which could just end up taking forever to develop. So the fact that they've actually said, no, feature complete, we're starting polish, I think that we will. I must admit, a couple of years ago, I got to the point where I thought a finished article for Star Citizen was vaporware. I was genuinely considering trying to do the research and make a video. You may well remember, Jamie, which was effectively like, is Star Citizen a scam? Because it got to the point where it seemed like their business model was not to produce a video game to release. It seemed like their business model was to maintain funding from people by selling ships and in-game items for real money in order to sustain their business and their development without a plan of ever releasing a real product. And I've got to say that this suggests to me that that's not the case anymore, and that actually they will release a real video game. Squadron 42, for people that don't know, is so Star Citizen has a perpetual universe with real. You don't have like real ships in the universe that you can really lose, and they cost you real money to buy, which is kind of mad. Squadron 42 is the single player game, which is a narrative game which has NPCs and play and stuff to do and things to unlock, and like a traditional game. And so I suppose it's a good jumping off point, which is one of the reasons I got it. So I bought a ship and I bought Squadron 42 at the same time. I think it cost me like 75 quid back in the day.
Well, I mean, it depends what kind of game Squadron 42 ends up being, but if it does have 40, 50, 60 pounds worth of value relative to the what else is happening on the video game market at any given time, then maybe you've done okay. I don't know what the value of the ship was on its own.
So I actually got a better ship. So I used to have a Mustang Alpha, which was like a one-seater little ship, which was very cool, looked very cool. But I believe I convinced someone at the time on All Time Gaming that for the streaming that we were going to need a better ship. I was going to need a better ship, and I didn't mind if they were happy to front the money to upgrade my ship, that it would be a better video. And it was a better video, and it was because I think there's some problems with the beta at that time. It was very buggy. And so I've got a better ship because of the powers that be at All Time Gaming.
Yeah. Do you remember when we did that for GTA Online, when they added the casino to the game, and we convinced our bosses that we needed like 100 quid's worth of shark cards each, so to have in-game money to do in-game gambling, so that we could stream ourselves going to the casino and being high rollers. It was beautiful. Yeah.
But so I didn't even answer your question. I'll very, very briefly say. So you said, is it fun? Star Citizen's not about being fun. Star Citizen, if it works as intended, and as I think it might do one day, is all about being a phenomenal achievement of sci-fi, like space sim.
Like, persistent real-time, like space travel and dogfighting and cargo transporting and
everything people complained that wasn't in Starfield, because if it was in Starfield, it would have been unplayable. They are putting in Star Citizen, but but it's because you're not playing it to get through a game in 30 hours. You're playing it because you're going to take 20 hours of real time to travel from one point to another, and like in fun, and it's everything's simulated and it's phenomenal. And you can travel somewhere and get out of your ship and float around and get in someone else's ship when they don't realize and steal it. You can work on another person's ship because you haven't got one of your own as like a gunner. You can live out the life of a jobbing turret operator on a big frigate like that, which is, no one wants that on an Xbox because it would be boring.
Yes.
But thousands of people want it on a PC when they can sit and live out that mini fantasy of like hopping into their job after their job.
Yeah, but it must be noted that that fantasy still remains a fantasy for as long as the focus on this sort of update and the thing that is now being described as feature complete is Squadron 42, right? Which is a standalone single-player experience that Cloud Imperium are calling a cinematic story-driven campaign. And I do just want to say, because this kind of blows my mind every time I'm reminded of it, the purported cast of Squadron 42, assuming they all can make the cut and that like nothing weird has changed in the decade since they filmed their roles, includes Gary Oldman, Mark Hamill, Gillian Anderson, Mark Strong, Liam Cunningham, Andy Serkis, John Rhys-Davies, Jack Houston, Eleanor Tomlinson, Harry Treadway, Sophie Wu, Damson Idris, Eric Wareheim of Tim and Eric fame, Rona Mitra, Henry Cavill, and Ben Mendelsohn, which, in terms of just Hollywood level talent, is probably the most significant cast ever assembled for a single video game. I'm trying to think of something that rivals it, and there's not much that comes to mind.
Like COD manage one or two big names. Like
that's the thing, yeah.
That's about it. Like this was. I remember back in the day when they originally said, I think it was Gary Oldman and Mark Hamill were going to be in it, and I was blown away. I was like, wow, this is phenomenal. This is phenomenal. Like, Squadron 42 is going to be amazing. And then, they just added to that list over time. And but they had so much money, though. It's not that surprising, get some decent faces in there, get some decent voice actors. They're very lucky. In the amount of time it's been that they haven't had any of the major cast cancelled for like any really bad reasons, because I imagine that would be pretty bad for a game of this scope if you suddenly had to take out like a main character, or maybe not. Maybe you just like dub them and change the face a little bit. And it's fine, but
There's even people in there where it's like, I don't know exactly when I don't know when Ben Mendelsohn filmed his roles, whatever his role in Squadron 42 is, but I bet he wasn't a part of both the Star Wars universe and the Marvel Cinematic Universe when he did. So there's a lot of people whose careers have, changed drastically for the better, in the time since this happened. So I guess that's just another benefit of...
it would be so nice if they do a release date, the game comes out, and it's phenomenal. Like, that is what I really hope for them. Not so that Star Citizen fans can rub it in people's faces, not so that people that go to Citizen Con every year or watch it online can say, "Ha, I told you." Like, I think we're so far past that. Like, it's been ridiculous to this point how long it's taken to produce.
Like, if you tried to "I told you so" me over Star Citizen, I'd just laugh and go, "All right, mate, whatever helps you sleep at night about the £200 ships you bought." Like,
Chris Roberts he's such a weird thing now that he's in this video that they put on YouTube about and 25 minutes of gameplay from, I think it's all from Squadron 42. He actually says that they're gonna make it's gonna be this generation's Wing 42. Wing Commander. But they're now so in time, they're so temporally separated from when Wing Commander came out, that this is going to becomes completely irrelevant. Like, people are going to go, "What are you talking about?" Like, Wing Commander, which is a game obviously Chris Roberts worked on donkeys years ago now. It becomes a bizarre comparison almost, because it's just taken this game so long to be made. But then maybe that's it. Maybe that's good. Maybe we should all be grateful that it wasn't forced to come out. There's no publishers making them do it quicker and all this.
But still, I think there are more disaster stories out of games with obscenely long development times than there are success stories. Which isn't me trying to, start digging the grave for Squadron 42 too early, but it's like, you also got to think about, like, well, as I'm sure their primary targeted platform has always been PCs, you've also even got to think about, like, generational shifts are not great for development. Like, engine shifts are not great for long-term development. Like when a game is in development for like 11, 12 years, a lot happens in that time, and keeping up, even just the standard, like the expectations of players shifts a little bit more year on year on year. And every time you slip, that's another degree of like player expectations that you have to keep up with. So it's
Yeah.
going to be a tough one for them. But if the end result of all of this and all the jokes and all the laughter is that a solid story-driven standalone campaign with that cast comes out and is at least halfway good, then that'll be great. I'd place a good Squadron 42 game. Why not?
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
they could use the cash injection of all the people that haven't yet bought it, I would imagine.
I don't think they do need the guy. In fact, I think Squadron 42 should probably be free. That seems the most fair way of going. No, I'm joking. If I had to do the most annoying thing in the world and ask you for a predicted release date and Metacritic score for Squadron 42, or release year and Metacritic score for Squadron 42,
I'm going to say 20. Oh, I'm tempted to say 2026.
okay.
Maybe beginning of 2026. I think it's going to be like 2.5 years.
Yeah,
Before we see it.
that sounds like a polished phrase to me.
Which is a long ass. I know that is a ridiculously long time, but I have to. They've said it can take a long time when you've got such a.
Yeah.
You've got to imagine it's like such a big game because it has the mechanics and it has the, the gubbins of Star Citizen, the persistent universe. Like it's set in that. It's not like it's a different thing. It's still set in all of that. So there's a hell of a lot to make sure is working. There's a hell of a lot of systems, of RPG systems, of physics systems to get right. I'm excited. I'm also not hopeful that it's going to be anytime soon. Yeah, let's say 2026, beginning of.
Okay. I could wait for that long. I'm hoping I'll still be around by then. No guarantees in this life, but
That's ridiculous, isn't it? Because that's not even Star Citizen, the persistent universe. That's just Squadron 42.
No, but at the same time, you're holding them accountable for the standards they have set for themselves over the past 11 years, which is that things seem to take them a lot longer than it takes anyone else. And, whilst, yes, the goalposts have moved a lot, for most of what Cloud Imperium Games have been working on and touching, Squadron 42 isn't one of those things. Yes, It's been caught in the crossfire, but Squadron 42 has always been a standalone product. Yes, you can feature creep on that front massively, and a lot of games do, but not to the same degree as I'm sure Star Citizen proper has experienced. You've got to imagine this is more of a case of, even as CIG have grown over the years, large number of employees, offices around the world, there's still going to have to be a priority chain in terms of what they're working on, and it's not hard to imagine a world where the priority became Star Citizen over Squadron 42. And until at such a time where it made sense to kind of maybe get a bigger subunit together to say, hey, go back to Squadron 42, pick up where we left off, and like make it something appropriate for modern audiences. The only problem was they had that conversation in 2019. Whoops.
Can I make another prediction, which is gonna,
of course,
which I hope doesn't come true. I think that not long after if they do manage to get it by 2026, it will be like the end of that year when you see another game come out which does everything Star Citizen can do, should do, was promised to do, and it was made in like 3 years by a company utilizing generative AI.
I wish I hadn't said yes.
Like there's a thing about like in like space travel where the idea is if you launched a rocket ship now to Alpha Centauri with the best technology we have today, it would be irrelevant because by the time they were a third of the way there, they would be overtaken by a faster ship that we'd have made 100 years later. But the technology is so much better. But then there would be no point in launching that ship because a third of the way into that one's journey, it would be overtaken by a better ship. And I worry that Star Citizen's development has been so long that they're just going to get leapfrogged by someone else, in a much quicker fashion.
I mean, again, that is what tends to happen with games with extremely long development cycles. Like they can't keep up because the video game goalposts are moving all the time. Like we go back to the top of the podcast and talking about Insomniac Games, and like maybe one of the reasons they seem to be able to always be at the cutting edge, technically speaking, is because they actually have such a tight schedule and such quick turnarounds. And maybe
Very
when you're
true.
releasing a game every year or two, you are always on the cutting edge. And it's the second you fall behind and you're chasing, the current sort of standards, that things become a lot trickier. We'll
I'd say
find out in 2026.
I tell you what I need to do now is I need to reinstall Star Citizen and see where they're at the moment, because you can play
I
it
would
now.
go
You can
that
play
far.
the persistent universe in, I don't know what they're in, alpha or pre-alpha or something, and you can jump into it. But like every time I did that before, like every year I'd be like, oh, I'll hop back in. It was basically the same, which was kind of
Yeah.
annoying. And then occasionally they would do like a big update, and it would be very different. But generally, it was pretty much the same year to year. So
I'm going to suggest, or at least remind you, that there are a not insignificant number of games being released every single week at the moment, that all deserve your time and attention, and perhaps most importantly, your money, a lot more than anything that Cloud Imperium Games have released
very
thus
fair.
far. But at the same time, if you, if we're sat here next week and you've fallen off Spider-Man because Star Citizen re-entered your life, that would actually be quite entertaining for the sake of a podcast, because I would get quite angry. So
It shouldn't be that long that a game's in like early access or whatever you want to call it. I bought a HOTAS that I now don't know where it is. Literally, I don't even know if it's in my house anymore. It's somewhere. It's probably packed in a box
damn,
in a
did you
cupboard
not
in the
bust it
loft.
out for Flight Sim
Yeah, but that was 2 years ago,
3? I think
3 years ago. Well, there you go. So now I don't know. I don't even know where that
actually
is
that
now.
I might be pulling that out my arse. I've got no idea when Microsoft Flight Simulator came out.
But yeah, so I'll have to find that again uh, to give a Star
I
Citizen a
mean,
blast.
I feel like they're not the kind of thing that just disappear. You'll find it.
Oh
You'll
no,
you just
it'll be in a
you just
box
need to
somewhere.
remember where to look. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, all right. Well, we've got a couple of really interesting story threads here. Will Jonesy reinstall Star Citizen?
Yeah.
Will he find his HOTAS? Will either of us finish Spider-Man, or will Jonesy get too distracted by the promise of delivering cargo to do so? All these questions and more will have to be answered in next week's episode of the Super Show podcast. Jonesy, thank you so much for joining me as we recapped the past week in gaming.
Thank you, mate. Thank you very much for doing a wonderful job hosting. Thank you to everyone who was chatting along while we were going in stream on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And a reminder, if you want to join those fine folks who have been watching the live stream and chatting alongside with us, then you can do so by heading over to our YouTube channel. We're live every Monday evening UK time, and as always, if you miss that, you can do what you might be doing now, watching the video on YouTube after the fact or listening on podcasting platforms. And I will remind you once again that link for our Patreon, patreon.com/supershow. A huge thank you once again to everyone who has already gone over there and pledged. And with that, we will say thank you so much for watching, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you back here, same place, same time next week. Until then, I hope your life is great. Goodbye.